We're going to go through your initial VSPro setup. I'd recommend maybe just watch this the first time and then go back and do or explore VSPro after you kind of get an idea of what we're going to accomplish here. So let's open up Unity. And this course, again, might look a little bit different than the other ones in my examples because we've made some changes to how we handle VSPro. And so this is the Hershey Country Club. Rock Creek is finished. It's been published under the name Glacier Golf. So different course, but I'm going to be setting up VSPro for this course, and it's going to be the exact same way that you need to do it at this point. So you should have already installed VSPro in the previous video, and then you went through a couple of theory videos, which you should now understand about terrains. So now we're going to actually do the initial setup. So after you did the install, we've got our VSPro over here in our scene. We've got our sub folder here, Vegetation Studio Pro, and then we've got all this options over here. There's a lot of stuff going on. So just let me show you here how some of this stuff works. So first of all, let's start all these tabs up here. We're going to start going through there. So first of all, the settings tab, we don't need to do anything in here at this point. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever done anything in this settings tab. I'm not sure why they had that. I'm not sure what a lot of this stuff does. So, but we're going to skip over that and go to cameras. The first thing you're going to do is just remove this camera that is in here by default. It's not going to cause any issues. It might throw some errors. I know it throws some errors on the GS Pro side in game. So if you remove that camera, it'll just keep things a little bit cleaner. So that's the first thing, is just remove that camera. The next thing is you're going to come over here to this terrains tab. And when you open this up, it should by default add any terrains that you have in your scene. And in my scene, I currently have a foliage terrain and I have my inner terrain. I'm not doing an outer on this course, okay? So your outer might be added here. What you want to have on this screen are any terrains that you're going to plant vegetation on, okay? That is definitely going to be your foliage, your outer, but not your inner. And if you don't understand why, you need to go back and watch those theory terrains or the theory videos on terrains at the beginning of this playlist. All right, so I'm going to remove my inner because remember, I do not want to plant on it. So if I click on that little circle thing here to the right, I can come up here and hit FFF and double click on none and it'll remove it. Again, if you have an outer, your outer should be in here, or you can just click add all Unity terrains and your outer should be in there. And then you could, and if you do that, of course, you're gonna have to remove your inner again. You should just have to remove your inner at this point. One note when you do this is if you come over here and you look at your terrain, you'll see that you get this Unity terrain script added to it so that Unity can plan on that terrain. And there'll still be there on your inner, that script will still be there. That's fine, you can leave it there. As long as you come back here and then on your terrains here, your inner is not listed, you're completely fine. One note here, make sure right now your foliage, and if you have an outer, make sure it is added in here. If you start removing or adding additional terrains in here, you're going to mess things up. You want your terrains established before you do anything planning. Long story short here is that your persistent planning, which we'll talk about eventually in these video series, will get messed up if you add additional terrains later on. Okay, so before you do any persistent vegetation planning, you want to make sure that your terrains are established. Okay, that also goes for mesh terrains, which are more of an advanced topic that I don't cover. So if you decide later on that you want to add a mesh terrain, which for example would be I can import a prefabricated mountain or hill and put it in my background, and I have to add that as a mesh terrain. Okay, if I add that mesh terrain after I've already done some persistent planting, you're going to have problems. Okay, so I just want to forewarn you there. Do some research on mesh terrains or ask around in Discord. It won't be covered in this video series. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so moving along, let's go down to our vegetation tab here. Now these should be set for you based on the VSPro installation package that I've given you. but I'm going to explain what these are because you might need to tweak these later on. So this is the default settings for these, and this is what we recommend to start. And what this is establishing is any grasses or plants that you plant via VSPro, they're going to render out to 300 yards. And after 300 yards, they're going to cull, or what we say, they're going to disappear. Okay, so looking out on your golf course, after 300 yards, those grasses will be gone, which is fine because really when you look 300 yards away, grasses really aren't that clear anyway, but this is a good starting point. Then this next one is this additional mesh tree distance. So that's an additional to this. So we got 300 for our grasses and another 200 additional for our trees. What's that equal? 500. So that means looking out on the golf course, any trees that you plant will be rendered out to 500 yards. Okay. After that, they become what we call billboards, or two-dimensional representations of that tree. All right, their billboards are very efficient. Anything within 500 yards, you're really working with a three-dimensional tree, and you have to process those a little bit differently, and it's harder on your GPU. So after 500 yards, your trees turn into what we call billboards, and we'll render billboards up to 4,500 yards, so quite a ways away. Now, a lot of I'm going to be talking about in the videos moving forward are performance. And if you plant your grasses and your trees way too thick, okay, you're going to run into performance problems. But if you're close, okay, and your grasses, you need to like just maybe grab a few frames per second and pick up a little bit of performance, you could always come back here and tweak these. Maybe lower this grass down a little bit, maybe lower this tree mesh down so they billboard a little earlier, and you're going to pick up a few frames at the expense of your grasses and your trees disappearing at a shorter distance. So I'm just going to leave those where they are for now. Okay. A little bit later on, we're going to be talking about this sum again. Remember, that's 500 in here, and that's going to be important a little bit later on. So just remember that. Now, another thing on this tab to keep in mind are these density sliders down here. Leave them alone for now, but later on, again, if you're looking to gain a little bit of performance because you planted your grass is too dense, your plants too dense, your trees, your objects, or some things, you could always come down here and you could lower that density. However, be aware if you do this, you lose a little bit of control because you don't know what trees are going to be removed. You don't know what grasses are going to be removed. VSPro is going to make that decision for you. So again, if you just need to gain a few frames per second, you could come back here and do that. However, keep in mind if it's a particular hole that you're having issues with, you're more or less probably better off adjusting the tweaking on that hole because this is going to be affecting your whole scene. So holes that are performing well, that have great density and look great, well, you're going to lose a little bit of that appeal and that look by lowering that density here. Okay, but I just want you to make you aware of these. Again, these are all things that you probably should avoid tweaking unless absolutely necessary. I would say that you're better off planting your grasses and your trees more efficiently from the get-go. Okay. So at this point, this is really the general finish or initial setup for VSPro. Not much to do with it, but next we're going to go into biomes. And this is where you're going to start customizing things for your course. And that's really where the fun begins.